Mariam.
Hi, Maria.
How are you?
Great.
I'm so happy, by the way, that you've agreed to do this because as someone that's been on the spiritual path for, I would say, 10 years now, your journey has inspired mine in so many ways. Although we've only really known each other for over a year.
Yeah.
We met last February. And since then, I feel like we've grown together. We've had many different lives since then.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just so grateful. You're the first person I interview in the last 2 years. So, and it's on screen, so it's a little bit different.
It's exciting. Well, firstly, I remember we were together last week and you were saying to me how you've been feeling very inspired by this greeting, Jai Gurudev.
Yes,
So
by
just
the way.
to start off, Jai Gurudev, greeting to the Divine Presence within.
Jai Gurudev. Yeah, I say it all the time, by the way. Like when I think of you or when I don't think of you, I'm like in my head, I'm like, Jai Gurudev. And I get super excited and I'm like, okay, I like that. Like it's such a nice greeting. And maybe you would like to explain what it means a little bit more.
Jai is victory,
Okay.
and Gu is the process of darkness, Ru is light, and Gur is the transmutation of darkness to light. So it's an invocation and a greeting of the divine teacher that is within all.
I love that.
Yes.
Kind of reminds me of the cards that we pulled,
Yeah, we had
right?
an interesting pulling of cards just before coming on.
It's so funny. So we use this deck over here and we're like, okay, maybe we pull some cards out. And there was victory and success.
Well,
So-
it started off with...
Yeah, I started with the good.
Yeah. And then the other cards were...
Conflict and defeat and suffering and silence.
So
So
you're like, gosh, this podcast might change.
might change
gears.
directions. We're going to shift around. I mean, we are in between eclipse seasons. So it could also be interesting to talk about that a bit. But we can always start with where your spiritual journey started, if you feel like sharing a bit of that and how much you've changed over the years and the different paths you've taken and how you've chosen this path that you're on right now and your devotion to it.
So just to start, I teach kundalini yoga, as you know, and I'm very much versed in the kriya yoga system from Babaji, and I have a beloved spiritual master of the devotional lineages. But how I got here was quite a long and interesting journey. I would say since I was a child, and I know I have a very strong feeling it was the same with you, I had a very strong inclination towards the other realms and towards the fairies and towards, anything that was of any spiritual nature. I was very drawn to it. But I would say it was really in December 2012 that I had my first sort of awakening to, oh my gosh, this material reality of the five senses, of the objects, of the material, very dense material plane isn't the reality, actually. And I experienced a different state. I was with certain friends and, there was many things going on, but we were laughing at one moment. And in that moment, I just experienced this knowing that we were not this body. And we were not this body. We still had individual identities. What those were, I can't say, but this material separation disappeared for a moment. And that was actually 2 days before the 12-12-12, which I wasn't conscious of at the time.
Okay.
And the whole time we were together, there was a glitch on someone's computer and we couldn't figure out how to change from Ravi Shankar. He's this great Indian musician that inspired the Beatles. And I remember the next day, so we listened to Ravi Shankar for a very long time with these friends, and the next day he died in the morning. And I'm not really sure, what happened there, but he was a very strong influence on the Beatles and bringing that conscious of the East to the West. And I feel like that was a transition for me as well, of bringing the awareness of the Eastern philosophies into the beginning of them arising in my life.
That's so beautiful, by the way. I didn't know this part of your story.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how these things happened. You feel like that's where your curiosity really started and then you went down the yoga path from there, or was the yoga there before a bit, but not in that capacity?
It all started very much
all
there.
started
I had an inclination towards different practices, but for the spiritual, practicing for spirit, not just for asana or physicality, it started very much there. And it wasn't even a choice. It was like, my life was like this, and then suddenly it went here. And it came back it came closer. And, the last years it's been going in and out of this awareness, but it was from there, it just kind of went full volume. Before that, there was some meditation. There was a teacher that was teaching me meditation, but it very much started there.
It very much started there. It's so interesting how we're all put on the path. I feel like it's the path that finds us more than we go looking for it. At least it was the case for me. I wasn't looking to go down this path. And I did have inclinations when I was younger, for sure. Probably because I'm also like an only child, and so my imagination like ran wild. So I had to like find ways to, keep myself entertained. But when I first met you, you mentioned, the fairies and stuff. You reminded me of a fairy. Like, you give me fairy vibes, very much so. Like, it's such a beautiful, like, when I'm with you, it's like, oh yes, there is that magic. So you bring a lot of that in your encounters.
We met in very specific circumstances.
We did. It was such a special moment too, and we were in the desert, and there was like a fire, and there was a shaman from Mexico that was with us. So it was such a beautiful way for us to meet as well. And I feel like there's also something special when there's like Mariams and Marias that like come together. I don't know if it's like a consciousness in our name, the Divine Mother. So there is, I feel that when you said that, I like looked into your eyes and I felt it. So yeah, sweet. It's, I feel like there's that awareness of different realms.
Totally. And, last year there were the Wirarika, these indigenous elders that were visiting, and they have an unbroken lineage of over 5,000 years. And, this is like before fairy. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just saying, like, this is before the fairy. These are like some serious, like, people. They're working very deeply with the earth. And I was very lucky for many years to, I think I would say from 2018, really be sort of initiated deeply into the indigenous practices with indigenous teachers in Brazil, and with different elders that hold very strong altars. And all of this time I do feel like, and it's the same, I love the fairy realms, but it's that same thing of like kind of searching for a magic that isn't already present within.
Yes.
And it was this deep search, which brought me to where I am now, but it was still looking for a spiritual experience outside of myself. And I feel like that's been a big turning point for me, is stopping that search for more of an experience and more glitter in reality, but actually saying, wait, this external reality is not what I was looking for, actually. And I, instead of glamorizing it with more magic, looking at what is the inner reality. And it's only when we withdraw from these sense objects and the attachment that we have to relationships, to people, to ideas, for me, it was to expansive experiences, that then we can go deeper within.
I agree, by the way. So it's interesting because even the word like spiritual seeker is one that I don't use as much anymore, like to describe myself or when I'm talking to people. Because it's like, what are you seeking outside of yourself? Like everything is really within you. And like you said, of course, it has its purpose, it has its place, the things that you've done in the past and your spiritual journey and all of that. But now you're like on such a different path, and it's all to like look within you. And personally, I feel like that's the most powerful thing, because you get to explore things in an authentic way, and also meeting yourself where you are. I would say, at least for me. There's a lot of like honesty and compassion that grows when you do the work in this form.
Totally. And before we got on camera, we were just speaking about this theme of personal journey. And, I do feel with this, you'll know more than I do about the Chiron on the eclipse.
Yes.
That, a lot of people I know are going through some pretty dramatic situations.
Yeah, tell me about it, by the way. Yeah, I'm going through that too.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you and how it's like. And
yeah, it's this catalyzing moment.
Yeah, it is.
It's this catalyzing moment, and for many it looks like the earth is crumbling from under their feet, and for some it is.
Yeah.
People dying, very serious medical conditions, relationship drama, all the stuff coming up. And for those, I would say, that haven't had this practice, this solid foundation, or this deep, I know you have done a lot of deep inner work, then the earth is crumbling. But that crumbling is for the renewal. It's not because you're going to go down a black hole. It's because there's a new something waiting on the other side.
Definitely. There's like a rebirth that takes place when you allow yourself to surrender to that experience too. And a lot of people are afraid to go into that space, right?
Really?
Because they feel like they're going to lose control. They're going to lose sight of what they really want. Their ego gets really like triggered because it's like everything is coming up to the surface. All of their worst fears are coming up to the surface. And they can't escape anymore. It's that feeling of like you're backed into a corner and now you can't escape. And I feel like, at least for me, and I'm sure for you, there's so much gratitude for these practices that are in my life that have been there for the last 10 years that allow me to navigate these things. So even though I am going through maybe a bit more darkness or a bit more challenges, it doesn't scare me anymore. I don't get scared. I don't get terrified. I can sit with it. I can relax into it in some ways. I trust so much. Like my faith has strengthened so much that even when those experiences happen, like, okay, like it's just, you're showing me something that was always there, that maybe was buried a bit more underneath, that I've managed to like just put a bit of a balm or a Band-Aid. And now you're like, no, sit with this feeling. And now that I have, it really transforms you, and there's this alchemical change from within. And I feel like that's also where you grow and you evolve and you change, and you're not the same person. And in that in-between state, I would say, at least for me, like from being a previous you to the new you, there's a bit of like tenderness that is required, to be so tender on yourself and so gentle. So whoever's going through a tough time right now, I would say like, just be super gentle with yourself. It's okay that you don't know where you're going or what's happening or why the earth is crumbling. And if you have your practices, go back to your practices. But if you don't, it does seem like the end of the world.
Well, bigger than a practice is faith.
Faith, yeah, true.
So a devotional relationship, that's the first. And then practice help that build. Yeah, it's deep. I got very emotional when you were speaking because, you know, I feel like we're in this time where social media presents this very polished version and you don't see the grit somebody has gone through to reach a space and that they are going through continuously, because the spiritual path is like, roll your sleeves up, put your goggles on, get ready. And when you feel like you've reached the place, that's when you know, there is a new pilgrimage to take inside. And my spiritual teacher, Paramahamsa Vishwananda, he says the pilgrimage is not an external pilgrimage to these ayahuasca centers or to these vipassana, whatever. It's from the mind into the heart, 40-centimeter pilgrimage, he says.
I love that so much.
It's deep.
It is deep to go from here to here. It's you would think it's the closest one, but some people are so far away from it. But what I found, and maybe you have too, when you're in that space, you also allow people to drop into that space just by your presence.
Totally.
Right?
Yes, or not. Sometimes
or
I
not,
feel like as a spiritual person, I'm the worst person in the room. I was reading this. I don't know how I came on this like super orthodox preaching page on Instagram, but a friend shared a post and I was like, damn, like that really hits deep. It's like when you become, and let's take out all the sort of religious kind of messagery in this, but just to look at the underlying message, it's like when you start your path, you become the worst person because the spotlight is on.
Yes.
So everything that was tucked away, hidden, and you were living shanti shanti, everything blessed, suddenly the spotlight is on and you become the worst person. And what is that? It just means that you become aware of, and you know, I took out the sinful connotations that were on that meme just to give context. But it's that you start to become aware of your shadow.
Yes.
And it becomes a show because you are like, okay, the worst person in the room. And how do you move from that? And it's this idea, you know, in the Vedic philosophies, we go through 4 cycles of time. The first cycle being the Satya Yuga, truth, the time where you're fully immersed in the divine consciousness. All beings on the earth are living in divine consciousness. And every yuga, every cycle of time, you lose a quarter of the light. And now you're in the densest quarter, which is full immersion in ignorance. They describe this time as water will be sold. Like you will have to pay for water. Children will, there's all this disrespectful connotation to humanity, to the earth. People will be eating animal, whatever your belief system is. But
of course,
this abuse of the earth and of each other, kind of.
Definitely. I mean, we see that right now, full blown in our screens all the time. So.
Constantly. And now it's getting much more, it's like ugly, what's happening in the world. And so we're in this immersive time, and a lot of people get caught up in these cycles of time. Oh my God, we're in Kali Yuga, therefore this. And my spiritual master, once again, Paramahamsa Vishwananda, the wisest person I know, he says, I'm very much paraphrasing, but it's not about the cycle we're in, but it's about the cycle you're in. Are you living in your Satya Yuga? Are you living in your divine truth? Are you allowing room for that to cultivate through your practices, through your relationship to the divine, through your prayer? Or are you succumbing and living in the Kali Yuga? So we're living this pull and push, and people talk about this, the end of the world, and the Mayan, the people pulled on the Mayan, all these different conceptions of the end of the world, and we're seeing a lot of like biblical and scriptural stuff coming up, like the climate change and what's happening in Gaza. It's pretty serious situations. But again, it's this idea that in the world there will be these creations of pockets of time and space where are you living in your truth, or are you succumbing to...
And if this moment in time is not pushing you to live in your truth, I don't know what will. For me, that's the thing. It's like, it's such a time of awakening. If you haven't awakened yet, and if you have, to know that you're going to continuously awaken to to things that you're not aware of. That's what kills me, It's like every time, like you said, like you think you reach, it's like, oh, great. Like
here's the next
thing. Here's the next layer. Here's something else we need to peel off. Like here's a bit more of your darkness that you didn't see before. And there, for me, at least for the last few years, there's been so much more integration of my own darkness, and to accept that there is that. And at the same time, there is so much light. And to hold the space for both things. And I love what you said, like you're the worst person in the room, because I'm sure that there are people out there that probably think this about me, or, that, like, what, but at the same time, there's also a lot of peace. There's a lot of peace, because I understand as well that as much as we are divine beings, we're human beings, and I'm going through these cycles. But it's interesting. Things happen really fast as well. Like, it's crazy, because for me, the last few days, so many things happened. And my faith is what allows these things to be cleared out that much quicker. Like in the past, it might have taken weeks to heal or mend a relationship. Now it's like the next day, within 24 hours, within a few hours, it's like it's there. Like you have to surrender to that unknown force that is pulling you down, and then also at the same time hold so much love within yourself. Even whoever that person you're interacting with has hurt you, you still have that much love for them.
Totally.
And then it's like magic.
I think it comes with humility. I think the training is humility.
It is humility.
And I think, like, especially this Pluto and Scorpio generation, where we've gone through grit at a young age and teenage years, there's some pretty serious, alarming stuff like going on internally. It's this training to be humble. Because, like, when life throws things at you, and externally it might look beautiful and blessed, which it is, of course, ultimately, but there's still inner challenges, and it trains you to be humble. And that way, when you are confronted with a dynamic, you can forgive more easily because you have been in those circumstances.
Exactly.
And that's the training of the heart, is like, I had a blessed I'm going to just put this up and be vulnerable live, is I have an interaction with a friend where we bring things up for each other, and luckily she's really doing the work, and so we're able to really get to really big new stages together. But recently it was a very small thing, but she said to me, sometimes I feel like you hate me. And I was like, oh my God, you're one of the people I love the absolute most. And I started looking at my behavior to my friend, and I was like, wow, I'm not surprised. I want to cry. I'm not surprised she thinks I hate her. And that for me was a huge humbling of like, wow, I'm acting not the way I'm preaching. Like, I'm acting in this relationship the opposite of how I appear in my class or in my Instagram, or how the absolute opposite. And so then you're like, wow, okay, so then you start to change.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if your intention, your north node is this principle of love, then there's nothing you cannot face. And that's why I feel people who have the most capacity for love face the biggest challenges.
I love that so much, by the way, and I agree. I mean, there are a lot of things sometimes that people do tell me or like bring up in me, and perhaps 5 years ago, that would have been a trigger. Like, oh, why are you saying this about me? You know, it's like there's a bit of that hurt. Now it's like, if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't even pierce me anymore.
Totally.
It's like, okay, it's fine. You can think whatever, but it doesn't hurt. So then I'm like, okay, that's been cleared. But if it does bring a bit of that sting, I'm like, perfect. Like, thank you for showing me this part that I have gotten used to perhaps in my 30 plus years of life, that I don't recognize that I can act out in this way or cause harm. And it puts me back into, like you said, that I'm humble. I come back into my humility. Thank you for showing me something new. And to have that, by the way, that radical self-honesty is so powerful. How many people would actually take that in and be like vulnerable about it and understand and want to make changes? How many people have you said that to and nothing changes, right? So
yeah, it's interesting. I'm a firm believer that when we change, the other can change.
Oh,
If
for
we
sure.
see love in the other, if we're holding a projection on someone or a judgment, and you know, you may have done so much work, but there's still, and it might be your favorite person, but there's subtleties out of your own inner narratives. They'll come out, you know, and it's about, do I succumb to my mind and what my mind is telling me in this moment, or do I choose to see love? Because at the end of the day, every single person, no matter how harmful they are on this earth, think of the worst person on this planet.
I can think of so many right now.
They are just love that hasn't realized itself yet.
Yeah.
It's just that. And there's many instances in the Vedic scriptures with stories where the biggest demon that's harming populations and wants to rule all three realms and harming children, then you hear the whole story, and then it's like, oh, and that demon was actually the incarnation of the closest servant of the Lord that was playing out this polarity.
Interesting.
So we're in this polarity planet, and how do we get pulled into the polarities and pulled into the narratives and dialogues, but actually choose to see love instead? And that for me is a training I'm still very much in, getting constantly churned in. How do I choose to see love in this person, in this situation? And
It requires, I feel like for me at least, and maybe it's different for everyone, for me to be able to see that, I have to go deep within my psyche, within my emotions, and to see my capacity to also have that darkness if it were me. And if I can extend the love there, then it's like put anybody in front of me and then I'll be able to love them because I've been able to do it within my own world, if that makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and that's the thing, I think for me, what I've noticed, and I've only kind of reframed this now recently, like I like to go to places with my mind and my emotions and my stories where people might not go and explore because it puts me in that position and it's like my own little purge within me. And that's where I feel like, okay, now this has come up. You've taken me all the way there with this, and to sit through that, to sweat through that, to fear that, and to like really find my way back to love from my mind to my heart. That's where I feel like transmutation takes place. And then when I'm with people, it's crazy, but the last few months especially, triggers are not as triggering. I'm getting much less triggered. Whereas before, if I'm in the car and I'm driving, if someone passes in front of me, I could very well get triggered and like get upset and get angry. Now it's like, okay, go ahead, you know? There's still a teeny tiny bit at the back of my mind, and I can sense it, but in comparison to before, where it was this huge, dense energy, where it was like, how dare you, or how do you say this about me, and you think I'm this way? And now it's like, okay, Like, I can understand why you felt this way because I felt this way.
Absolutely, because the other is a mirror.
Exactly.
Eternally. The other is an eternal mirror.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
It's amazing.
So we're just you and me talking to each other.
In some way, in some sense. And, you know, and this thing I navigate a lot. It's this, you know, no matter how many layers you're pulling back and how devoted you are and how disciplined you are in the practice, this, and I close my eyes to really be able to like give it voice, is this constant nagging of the mind of what others think of me. And it's like, who cares? Essentially, who cares? And it's getting from that place, because it's actually that fear of like what the other thinks of me, and it's actually a disease of the mind. It's a self-obsession.
Yeah.
And the way through that I found is through divine remembrance, and that comes through for me, mantra practice, remembrance of the divine names, because then you're basically training yourself through your entire life to remember something greater than you. Because when you're remembering God, you are finally, for a split second, not absorbed on the me, I, me, mine, my problems, my, you know, and it's finally about something greater, and you're allowed to dip the ocean of the mind into the infinite, into God, into whatever that name is of the divine that you feel close to. You're able to merge in that. And there's this beautiful mantra, Shri Vitala Giridhari Parabrahmane Namaha. It's this gift that I just want to leave in this moment of practice. And it's I won't go too much into the meaning of it and so on,
but it sounds beautiful.
It's this honoring, this revering. And for me, that's my path. Is because there's many paths, right?
I was going to ask you, like, there are many different paths, obviously, with the yogic path. And you've chosen to go down the bhakti path, correct? Which is love and service for God.
Totally. So there's in the Bhagavad Gita, there's these 3 paths that are recommended. There's karma yoga, so if you want to get to the final, so there's, let's like contextualize a little bit. In like the Vedic understanding, there is what you can call these absorption states. So where these highest, because we talk about enlightenment and all of these things. And there's these states of enlightenment where you absorb yourself into the divine. But before you get to that stage, there's the self-realization, which is brought through kriya yoga, but also through karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga. So the karma yoga is that you offer all your actions throughout your day to the divine. So I'm cleaning the floor, I'm brushing my teeth, I'm feeding my kids, I'm doing my job at the office, whatever it is, I'm in that moment, I'm just offering it to the divine. At the end of the day, I say, Krishna Arpan, or God, I give you all of the deeds of my day. And that's your karma yoga, you're giving all the action, because we're bound to action. And some people, they take the path of jnana yoga. There's some advanced yogic practitioners in India, and they choose the path of meditation, meditating on the self. That's how they want to attain their final goal. But for most of us, we should meditate, but we are bound to action. It's by nature, we want to act in the world. And so the highest path that's recommended is bhakti, because it's very, very, very hard to do jnana yoga properly. And, you know, even if you are in the cave on the mountain and you have really renounced the mind, it's still about you. You're still meditating for you. You're still doing the yoga for you. And these tools and these kriyas, they're amazing for self-mastery. But one has to practice with the mindset of, I am not practicing for myself. I am practicing for the divine. Otherwise, it's still this me, I, me, mine parade.
It's so interesting. And the way that you formulated this, honestly, it brings me back to my yoga teacher training so many years ago, because I thought that I was the third one, the jnana yoga?
Jnana yoga.
Yeah. I forgot how to say it. So that was the one that I thought I was going to go down, because I love to study and self-reflect and meditate. And so it's interesting that you explain it in this way, because I'm like, at the same time, I'm someone that loves to be of service and to act. So I would, if I had to categorize it, I'd be in like the bhakti path, and
it's the most joyful path.
It seems like it too, right? But so you're down this path right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you feel like over the last few years, how has that changed your life?
Oh my God. I mean, it's given me a deep sense of, well, it's through my teacher really that I've been able to understand this deep knowing that eternally God is with me. And that means that in the depths of a challenge, this is also God. And really knowing that in the moment of like, not allowed to waver 1 millimeter into doubt, that, you know, that is that deep training of like, everything is God. Everything and everyone has divine presence within. And it's that that training and that navigation of understanding life through that lens.
And it's a beautiful lens. I mean, what a world we'd be living in if that's the lens that everyone saw it, right? Like if people can see everyone and everything, including their enemies, including their whoever, including themselves sometimes too, right? Their own inner demons. If they could also see that as that, then we would be approaching things in such a different way.
Totally. And it can't be from the mind.
No. It has to be, again,
from
that 40-centimeter journey to the heart.
Because we're so attached. Like, we're so attached. And like the deeper, at least for me, the deeper I've gone, the more I've like been like, wow, these attachments, they're real. And you think you're like, nah, I'm okay with that. I don't need to eat chocolate for 6 months. But then, you know, there's this
You take the chocolate away for 6 months.
I took it away. I had to.
Yeah.
Never to, you know.
Yeah.
But then you realize actually taking the thing away, the attachment is still there.
Because you'll find another attachment.
Totally.
You transfer it. I realize this with myself. I'll transfer my attachments around, you know.
That's why the practice needs to be there, because then you attach to the practice and that inevitably will always bring you closer.
Yeah.
Obviously there's practice.
Yeah, then do let go of the practice if we're looking to non-attach.
There's a great teacher. He did his sadhana religiously for his entire life. Hardcore. He's an enlightened master, so hardcore he did it. The one day he decided to not do his sadhana and go for a run instead was the day he became enlightened. So it's just like, you know, you need to practice. We all need to practice because we're so attached externally. Unless you're the kind, I know 2 people that have that space that they can really have that inner relationship without needing the practice. Because the practice can also be a crutch.
I was going to say, I mean, if we're practicing non-attachment, the practice becomes the crutch.
Yeah. But attachment to God is always valid.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always okay because that will always bring you back to God.
Okay.
So there are certain, you know, there's Buddhist philosophies where it's full non-attachment because there's that notion that there is only emptiness, that there's nothing. But my belief is there is fullness. There is God in everything. It's not the notion of emptiness. Emptiness of ego.
Yes.
Emptiness of pride, emptiness of arrogance, but fullness of divine love. Yeah.
It's interesting you even mentioned pride because it was one of these emotions that I was working through for some time because pride, you know, I'm proud of you or like I'm proud of myself. And I remember I had an energy healer that was like, you know, that this is not a high vibration emotion. I'm like, interesting. So now I'm not the type of person that says these things to people like I'm proud of you or, you know, I try to find other ways to show that I do recognize what they're doing without having to use pride as an emotion that I evoke. Is that something as well that you resonate with?
I do very much. I do very much when it's about a third-party perspective, but I do think there's a divine pride.
Okay.
Where you're brimming with this warrior expression of your soul without needing validation, without, you know, you're doing you're in this divine pride that isn't, my Guruji again, he did a tweet on that actually, I should know it by heart to tell you, but it's about divine pride and how there is an ego-free pride, which is a pride for God, you know, and I very much resonate, you know, I'm very much in the Kundalini yoga system and, you know, in my classroom, you were snapping your fingers earlier and you said like, just like this. And I do this in class and I'm like, just like this, you can change. It just takes that 1 second to change mindset.
100%.
And that comes to build that. For me, I'm really in the Kriya yoga world. It's about the Shakti and like really resurrecting the energy of your soul in the body through chanting, through physical exercises, through breathing to give you that physical experience of, and then you can be divinely proud of like, I'm in this space, but not with this need of needing that validation or needing to create expectation.
Yeah, because it's a natural outcome of the practice, of the breath work. It's there, right? Because it's the divine expression in this moment. And there is a lot of that for sure, like you mentioned. But it's not like, there's subtleties with it. It's so interesting that you say this one. So it's funny because last year I went on my first ayahuasca trip.
And bringing it in.
So I went, and honestly, like I felt like I was like if I were to get a grade, I was like I'd get an A+, like I got
nice.
an A+. So I told my energy healer this. I was like, by the way, like I know it's a bit of my ego, but I got flying colors. Like I mastered the session. Anyways, he's like, it's fine. It's okay if you have a bit of that. If you didn't, you just like, why would you even be here? Like, if you didn't have a bit of that, like, excitement. But I don't know. For me, that was the moment where I was like, wow, okay, I did really well. Maybe we'll go back to it. But at this point, I'm like, unless I get a direct phone call, like, from her, there's no need.
No need.
There's no need. Yeah, that's a whole other episode and conversation. But it was just that feeling of, okay, I got this. I sweated. There was all of these things that happened, but here I am. I'm good. Like I didn't let the mind, because I understood what was going on. It's like everything is me. Everything that I'm seeing is me. All of these things, it's all coming back to this part of me. So...
yeah, it's deep.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say I got pulled through the mud, I got -20, because I very much have gone into those depths. And again, it's all about just coming back to oneself.
Yeah.
And
to the breath. The breath, like, was my number one, like, anchor. It was that, and it was the prayers that I had put in before, like with my guides, the people that have passed that are my guides in this lifetime. I'm like, okay, you're here with me. And I kept remembering that throughout, So, yeah, of course, there was a lot of dragging. I mean, one of the nights I just did not move the whole time. I was sitting like this. And everyone apparently the next day, like, came up to me. They're like, you looked like you were...
in samadhi.
Going through some stuff. I was like, I was in war. Like, it was war. It was horrible. But I was like, no, we're going to sit through this, and we're not going to, like, fall, because the faith, again, was so strong. It was like, I know that I'm supposed to be here. I know. And again, it's not just with that type of ceremony, because life is a ceremony.
Totally.
So I'm supposed to be everywhere all the time, right? Like, it's not like in this special circumstances, I turn my faith all the way up. It's like, I want to turn my faith all the way up in the moments where I'm doubting, because there can be moments where I'm like pressing against a new layer. I'm like, do I have faith even if I go here? Do I believe even if I go a little bit further down? And it's like, wait, okay, increase it. Where is that belief system that makes you feel like God doesn't have your back, or God won't love you, or...
Totally.
So.
That's deep. I think we all have like those spaces, and I think we all know what those crutches are within ourselves that we're not ready to look at. For someone, it could be addiction. For someone, it could be something else. And I do really feel like gratitude is the most powerful grace, because wherever you are, if you remember to be grateful, you can change everything.
It is one of those higher emotions, definitely. Totally. And the thing with gratitude, the thing with any emotion, I would say, is that it coexists sometimes with the other stuff too, right? Like, you can feel grateful and then also experience grief. You can experience pain and also experience victory. I feel like sometimes because you mentioned the polarities of life, how do we find that inner union, that like sweet spot in between all of those things?
Yeah, I feel it's devotion.
It's devotion,
It's
exactly.
Finding your aspect of the divine and framing your life around serving that principle and that ideal.
Yeah, it is really nice. So we have a few more minutes together, and I'm like wondering, do we pull another cards, or do we like...
I think they want a card.
I think they want a card. Yeah, you want a card. Okay, you also want a card. Let's see. Do you want to pull it?
No, you go for it.
You're
You're
the...
the...
What it... Oh.
That one seemed like it was
Right?
picking out, yeah.
It was.
Ooh.
There we go. I think it's a really good one. Authority. Okay.
Interesting.
Interesting, right?
What does that mean to you?
For me, that's like the embodiment of like the masculine more, right? That would be, how about you?
For me, it feels like my practice.
Fertility.
Beautiful.
That's so nice. Okay, 4 and 3. And they both have like these circles
And they're
around
both
them.
polarities. It's like...
Exactly. So
Yes.
where am I supposed to show this? So we have authority. Yeah. And then we have fertility.
Beautiful.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we need one more
Sure.
for some reason.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Okay. We got 2 more, but fine. Material harvest, we're going to go with this.
Interesting.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes that guy on the authority card, he looks pretty rough and tough. And I do feel like for me, that's getting yourself on the mat. It's like getting to for me, it's kriya, because kriya is mantra, breathwork, asana, and meditation. Immersing your entire being and your consciousness in a discipline. So getting into that space of authority and coming into like, okay, come on, I'm going to pull you onto your mat and you're going to do your practice. And through that structure, having your sadhana, your daily spiritual practice, creates freedom. Through freedom, you can experience the creativity, the fertility, the blessing, and this ever blissful nature of life. And what was the third one?
Material harvest.
Yeah, then you get your you get your paycheck on the spiritual, for what you've put in material. You're harvesting
the fertility, the soil that you've planted those seeds in. But yeah, definitely the authority. I love the way that you put that. Totally. It is getting on your mat.
And the seeds being intention for good relation, intention for more devotion, intent, whatever that is, like seeing that flourish through your life. Yeah. But first you need to put in the practice. At least that's and
for sure,
that's going to bring up some stuff for some people. And sometimes the practice is to soften and not be too hard and not to do extreme fast. And so it's this beautiful thing. But Kundalini yoga for me is awesome, and Atma Kriya yoga even better, because these are 2 practices that give you direct experience of the soul in the body.
Okay, so you would recommend both? And you teach both?
No, I don't teach Atma Kriya yoga, but I can connect anyone to a teacher.
Teachers, okay. But you're teaching Kundalini yoga at this place called
Ekamai. Yeah, I teach in different places, but Ekamai is a home studio in the UAE.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I need to come and check it out and do a class with you. I've done Kundalini yoga a few times. And every time I do it, I'm like, I need to do this more. Like, I want to do this more. And then I don't go because obviously it brings up stuff. But what's interesting for sure is that when I first started Kundalini, everything was a challenge. It was like putting my hands up above my head, like, and repeating the movement. I was like, I'm done. Like, there was that fatigue that would come through, that I can't do this. But I always, for me, getting on my mat was always about facing my inner world. Always. Like, for me, I was like, I'm going to go into my practice because I need to understand what's happening within me. Very early on, it was very much this introspective thing, like practice that allowed me to explore parts of me that I wouldn't get to do if I'm like just walking around and I'm distracted. So I love that you mentioned that the practice is that, like, the authority, and you come back to it, because it does take discipline to get into like a consistent practice. And the fertility, I feel like it's this beautiful space where you're planting things and you also let go of the expectations. I feel like for me, a lot of times when I'm in child pose, I'll like just turn my palms up and I'm like, just let go of the fruits of your labor. It's not about that. Just let it go. Like, you're on this mat, not for anything else.
That's deep.
Yeah. It was very, I had really good teachers in my life, I feel, that taught me so much. Best teacher also sometimes is your inner teacher, but it's also beautiful when you find teachers and others as well that can guide the way. And I feel like the material harvest is what you receive, and it's bountiful and it's plenty, and there's enough, not just for you, but for everyone. I feel like for me, that's the yoga practice too. It's for everyone.
Practice for the service of the all.
For the whole.
May whoever needs this blessing receive
Yeah.
it.
Like, may whoever needs to listen to this or come to the path of yoga or the path of meditation, like, you will discover things, even if you're going through the first cards we got, like through the conflict and the defeat, and you're like on your knees, you can still crawl for a bit, and then you'll get up, and then maybe you'll fall down, but then, at least for me, it's like I get up faster now. It's like I'm not gonna stay down forever because of the faith.
Absolutely.
To continue on.
Yeah, a prayer for humanity. Mission of my guru. May all beings really devote themselves to cultivating that relationship within. May all beings have the grace to really succeed in that relationship and to have the revelation of love embodied within their lifetimes. Yeah, may all beings be very, very, very blessed, and just with this fertility card calling in this fertile soil of renewal, of remembering and really diving into love, into truth in all relationships. So yeah, may this blessing be with all beings on this day, with all waters, with all creatures. Thank you.
Thank you. Honestly, for such a beautiful, heart-opening conversation. I felt my heart open so many times while talking to you.
It was very joyful.
It was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to give you a hug.
Yes. Hug. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. I'm tangled.
Tangled? I don't want to let you go. I have to practice non-attachment. But yeah, thank you, and I'm excited to share this with everyone. And I highly, highly recommend following you on Instagram, Pachamama. Sindhu Dasi, though, is now
my spiritual name.
Your spiritual name. I love it. What does it mean again?
Sindhu is a river from the northern Himalayas. Now it's in the Pakistan region.
Okay.
And it's the home river from which all the sacred rivers were born. It's my understanding.
Beautiful.
And, yeah, it's this idea of like these cleansing waters. And yeah, it was given by my spiritual master. So usually it's what you need to work on.
But it suits you so much because I feel like you're definitely that OG source.
And Dasi is serving. So you're serving that eternally.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.